let's throw it on to questions on agents. That hopefully not questions.
One, two, one, two, one, three.
All right, we'll get in. And we got one. A broker is showing property by Smith, who's a what client. All right, so we've got a real estate broker who has a buyer client named Smith. Burke, who is our broker, has shown Smith 7 properties. Smith likes the property listed with Zane, which is what? That's a real estate company, isn't it? Now, do we? Absolutely, we do. So we're showing our buyer client a company's listing, and the broker, who's the buyer's agent, actually has with the following relationships. Let's see. A says that the represents the buyer or agent. Now, duality is only within one company. We've got 2 companies involved here. One has the buyer, the other has the property listed for sale. So A is out. He's not a dual agent. B says buyer represents neither the seller. No, there are buyers, and so they are representing the buyer. The buyer is their client. We were told that. So B's out. C says it's a agent of the seller. No, that would mean that they were joining the listing company and representing the seller. They're not. They are buyer's agent. We're told that in the first sentence. So the bottom line is the seller, who is represented by the other company, to the buyer broker, the seller is a customer. Because Burke, who's the buyer's agent, does not have a contract to represent the seller. They're representing the buyer. So in this case, it's a little weird, but the seller, the customer of the buyer agent, which is answer D to that one. Okay, what'd you pick on that? How'd you answer that one?
I picked A.
Picked A?
Yeah.
Okay.
No. Because I didn't understand, so I just picked the longest answer.
Oh no, I've ruined you, right? But remember one thing, of course, here you can see that there are 2 companies or 2 brokers involved, and dual agency is within one company, is not another company. So that's how we could eliminate dual agency that we have there. And then you, yep, go ahead.
Could you explain the sub-agent piece?
Yeah, this is the agency used to be the way we would co-op years ago. This would be before buyer agency ever came on the scene. If I had a buyer that I was working with, they would obviously be a customer. And if I were showing them your listing, my company would actually join your company in representing the seller. So under sub-agency, totally unrepresented. Everybody in the whole transaction would be working for the seller. But with the advent of buyer agency, we saw sub-agency just disappear. That normally the company with the buyer is the company representing the buyer, not as a sub-agent. But that's the old ways to do it before buyer agency ever came on the scene.
So would you say that if the answer had sub-agent, it's probably not the answer?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Pretty good. Eliminate and answer that, since it's pretty much gone today. All right.
You do 2.
1, 3.
All right. Well, let's do
1, 2.
1, 2, and then we'll do 3. Okay. Broker has an exclusive right to represent the developers of a new subdivision. Okay. Now, 2 I like, because this is a career opportunity for you guys. Now, do you know anybody that practices real estate right now? You guys?
Yes.
Yes.
Do you know anybody that is a subdivision agent?
Yes. Yes.
You do? Okay. You know what that means?
No.
When you get your license, let's suppose D.R. Horton, who's a big residential developer, lets you know that they're looking to bring on new agents. Well, you go to D.R. Horton and they hire you, and they're going to put you in a subdivision. So every day you will go to work in that subdivision, and basically you're there to represent who? D.R. Horton, or the developer and builders in the subdivision. That's what 2 is telling you. You're a subdivision agent. You're sitting there. You represent the developer and or builders in that subdivision. So you got a listing broker has an exclusive right to represent the builders in a subdivision. The broker shows properties in the subdivision to prospective buyers who are not working with other agents, and prepares offers for those who decide to buy. So you're sitting there in your model home. A buyer comes in, wants to look at houses. That's where this question's taking you. Well, the question is just asking you one simple question. Who do you work for? Who is your client? Well, it is obviously the developer that hired you and put you in that model home. Those buyers that come into your subdivision are simply customers. And of course, you're going to try to sell them the product. That's where 1, 2 is going with the question. So A says the buyers and the developers are represented by the listing broker. No, they are not. The buyers are not represented by anyone. They are simply customers. B says the buyers are represented by the listing broker. No, they are not. The listing broker represents who? The developer or the builder. C says the buyers are not represented by the listing broker. Absolutely, that's the answer. And then D, the listing broker owes obedience to the buyers. No, they don't. Obedience is something that you owe to a client. The buyers in this case are customers. So this is the typical world that a subdivision agent lives in.
I guess I was confused because it said that they were going to prepare the offers for them. So I thought it was implied that they were going to be
Representing.
representing the buyers since they were preparing offers for them.
No. How many of you remember this term? You ready? Ministerial acts. Do you guys remember that from your classes?
Yes.
Employee.
You know what one ministerial act is? Preparing an offer to purchase for a buyer customer.
Got it. Okay.
Okay. So if you sit down at the computer in your model home and prepare an offer for a buyer customer that's come in and that you've been showing houses in the subdivision to, that buyer is still a customer, but even though you're preparing their offer to purchase, it does not create an agency relationship. Okay. So that's that one.
Question.
All right.
My
Go
question
ahead.
is, there is a clear difference between a client and a customer.
Okay. What about it?
I'm asking you, is there a clear
Contract.
difference?
Is a written contractual agreement. If someone is a client, you have a written contract to represent those people in either buying or selling a piece of real estate.
Yes.
That's what separates a client from a customer, is a written contract to represent them.
So
If you have it, they're a client. If you don't, they're a customer.
okay, so that's why the seller is a customer to Burke in 1-1.
And 1-1, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Because Burke did not have a contract to represent the seller. The other broker did, but not Burke.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
You're welcome. Now, 1-3 goes back to, remember we were talking about yesterday, the 3 different types of agencies: universal, general, and special. And we said universal, of course, you'll never run into that, but we do run into general agencies, and that's with property management.
Management, yeah.
Okay. And that's what 1-3 is saying, isn't it? A broker is hired to manage an owner's rental property. So they are a property manager. And what is the agency relationship that property managers occupy? They are called general agents because they have decision-making powers. They can make decisions for the clients that they're representing. Okay, that's just that thing we talked about. What's the only example of a general agent? Property manager. Well, here it says, all right, you're a property manager. What are you? You're a general agent. Okay.
So what's the
that's-
designation agent? Would that ever be something we would have to,
What is that now?
the D, designation
The
agent? What's that?
Well, that's sort of getting close to it. There's what is called a designated agent. That's a salesperson. That's when one company has both the buyer and the seller on the same transaction, and the broker designates one salesperson to represent the buyer and another salesperson to represent the seller. That's what is called a designated agency. But that would be in-house and in the buying and selling of real estate, not in property management.
I've noticed in a lot of the questions, they do have stuff that's not used in Georgia, like the universal and the married couple on the title thing you mentioned yesterday. Do they still use that in the exam, even though it's not Georgia?
Oh, yeah. Remember, of your exam, 100 of the questions are national in scope. So they could be, about real estate practice in other parts of the country, but not necessarily in Georgia. But then 52 of the questions are very specific to Georgia. So yeah, there's that's like people ask me all the time, why do we have to learn about rectangular survey as a method of legal description if Georgia doesn't use it? Well, that's part of the national aspect of the exam. Okay. All right. What else you got?
Can
Other
you do
agency
4,
questions?
6?
4, 6.
I just have a quick question about it. I
right.
actually came down to care and accounting. I'll wait till you get there.
All right. There we are. Okay.
And I chose accounting because it dealt with money. And so I'm trying to, am I looking at it in a too literal, like a CPA, or like, I'll let you read the question and everything, but I'm just confused at why it was care and not accounting when it was dealing with money.
Okay.
Keyword, negligent.
All right. The key word,
Okay.
you ready for the key word? It's in the second line and sort of in the middle, and the word is negligent.
Yep. Okay. Got it.
There's your key word. Remember, I told you yesterday that care is reasonable skill and care, and the opposite of that is negligence. Okay, so in this case, of course, the broker becomes aware of information that can have a direct effect on the seller, and they fail to notify the seller about the buyer's credit and background. They're being negligent in protecting the client's best interests, and that violates the obligation of care. So even though there's some money that they're throwing around in there, the only time you're going to run into accounting or accountability is if it says that money is being paid to the broker. Then you run into a king where the broker has to put it into an escrow account and so forth. That's the only direction they'll go in as far as accounting, handling other people's money that's given to a broker. Okay, but here the key word, and you, I mean, I know a couple of you picked up on it. The key word here is being negligent, and of course that violates the obligation of care. Okay, reason.
2-1.
What question?
Which one?
412.
2-1.
All right, 412 and 1.
And
All right,
4-8.
let's do 412 while we're here. Hang on, where'd it go? There it is. All right, let's see what 412 says. All right, licensee is acting as a buyer's agent for a client who is looking for a commercial property. Oh, cool. Okay. So you're a licensee, that's you. You're working with a buyer as a client, and you guys are working together trying to find them a commercial property. Okay. The licensee, that's you, finds an attractive corner site that may have been used as a gas station. The buyer wants to prepare an offer for this property. What should you recommend to the clients? All right, now this one really is a thoughty one. The bottom line is this, of course, obviously you need to be aware and know things that are very important in whatever aspect of real estate you're going into. Like here, they're talking about commercial. The problem that you run into, it says, you know, the buyer house that may have been used or finds a property that may have been used as a gas station. The problem you run into is that there are huge gasoline tanks that are buried under gas station sites. And those tanks could still presently be there under this particular attractive corner lot. So what you should do as a knowledgeable agent is recommend, that's what the question's asking you. If you know or have reason to believe that this might have been a gas station site, what would you recommend to any buyer or client that's considering buying the property? Well, look at your choices. A says prepare an offer with a condemnation clause. No, you know what that is? Condemnation clause says if the property is condemned under eminent domain, what will happen? That's not what we're talking about here. B says consult with an environmental expert. They're going to hit you with this over and over and over again. If you're involved in a transaction and there's something that you are unfamiliar with, bring in an outside expert. So here you would bring in an environmental company to basically ascertain whether or not there were underground gas storage tanks and if they're in good shape. And I'll explain that to you in just a second. Request spot zoning. That's not going to do you any good. That would be to simply rezone an isolated parcel. That's not what we're going to go to there. And then D says obtain an approval from the Environmental Protection Agency. Approval for what? we don't even know yet if there's any environmental contaminants or anything that's there. So what we have gone into an area with which we have no knowledge. And anytime you go into that area, you bring in an expert. In this case, it would be an environmental expert. And this example, I had a student, this was years ago, up in Toccoa, Georgia, that did this exact same thing. He bought a convenience store. Well, when he bought it, there were no gas, pumps or anything else like that. So he never really thought about it, but he owned it and operated it for several years and then decided to sell it. Well, the guy that made an offer on the property stipulated that he wanted an environmental study done on the site. And believe it or not, they brought in a company and did test drillings on the site and found underground storage tanks for gasoline where that convenience store used to sell gasoline. And they discovered that on the water table under this convenience store, there were 6 feet of standing gasoline from those leaking tanks. And they had to come in and, of course, obviously remediate that and go in and pump all the gasoline off and so forth. But they found that because of the environmental expert and them doing the test drilling. But it cost him a fortune to get that remediation done. But that's where this one's going.
B&D.
Hmm?
Thanks for answering that question for me. I was stuck between B and D, and I only went with D, thinking about when you don't know. Look at the longest answer.
Right,
but I
same.
really chose B.
I guess I should never have told you all that.
I know.
I didn't
okay,
say
yes.
100% of the time it would be right. You see, we can
I
hedge
know.
it.
Can
But-
I ask a question that kind of goes with that one?
Yeah,
and I
okay.
see maybe now why I got the wrong answer. So with
Mhm.
412, I always, in my class, kind of my professor told us to always defer to telling them that you need to have it surveyed. You need to do all those things. So on 47, I went with
Oh,
D.
okay.
Instead
I thought we were
of-
still on
I'm sorry.
47.
Well, I felt like it kind of said they're similar in my opinion, but is it because the agent basically disclosed where the boundary was they could be responsible versus immediately telling them to have a survey done on the property?
That's exactly right. You've got it exactly right. In other words, instead of sticking your nose into this thing and saying, well, here's what I think the boundary lines are or where their boundary lines are, but he didn't say, this is just my opinion. I don't know if these are really the lines or not. So he described it in a non-exact way. And then, of course, later you see what happens. And what, of course, obviously could be held accountable for misrepresentation. The answer is yes, because he knew that the boundaries could possibly be wrong. That's there. And what's wrong with A? Let's see what you have learned from what I've told you already this morning. What word in
So it was
A
B,
knocks
right?
it out?
Must.
Absolutely. Remember I told you, watch that. That's a great disqualifier. The broker must provide a survey. No, the broker should say to the buyer, you might want to consider bringing in an expert to do a survey.
I have a question. So
So
is
it
it
was B, right?
safe?
Go ahead.
Is it-
I'm listening.
Is it not a requirement to have it? Because I mean, looking at D, because the buyer is responsible for having, so people can buy properties without getting it surveyed. It's a choice.
Well,
Yeah, it's
but
a
we aren't
choice.
responsible to provide it, correct? They're responsible to get it if they want that. based on
If
what
they
you're-
No,
want
I'm
it,
just-
that's right.
I'm
Right?
just saying that in purchasing a property in general, it does not require, it's up to the buyer to choose whether they want a survey or not.
You're absolutely correct. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And you know what's really strange about that, to show you how things change, it was not that long ago that if a buyer was buying a property, two things the lender required was, one, a survey. So every residential sale would always involve a new survey. The other was a termite clearance letter. Both of those now are gone. And if a buyer wants a survey, that's their choice. If they don't buy it without a survey, that's up to them. It doesn't make any difference. And the same way with pest control. That's why you'll find in most of the contracts that I read, they will actually add a special stipulation that the seller will provide a termite clearance letter prior to closing, because it's no longer, a major part of a normal sale. Those two things disappeared.
Is that recently?
Probably in the last 3 to 5 years, something like that.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
5, 6, and 5 CP.
All right, let's see what we got down there. All right, let's see. By the way, did you notice what I told you, that most of these questions, remember we said, were either definition or application? Do you notice that just about all the agency questions are application, where you have to take what you know about an agency relationship and work your way through the story? That's what I mean by an application type question. Like here, a broker lists a property for $175 with instructions that the seller wanted at least $5,000 earnest money. Okay, so that's the term of the listing. $175, $5,000 earnest money. The broker produces an offer at full price and included $3,000 earnest money. We have a problem, folks. If you go present that offer, in this case, the broker goes present it and the seller doesn't accept it, would the broker be due a commission? No, because if the seller doesn't accept the offer, then to earn a commission, you must duplicate the terms of your listing. What did the listing say? 5,000 earnest money. What did the offer have? 3,000. So there is not a match. So accordingly, the broker has not earned a commission. And well, you got to watch out, because look at A, it says broker producer a buyer at the full price. That's part of it. We're good there, but the back end of that, the earnest money, is not. B says, yes, the earnest money is not required. Well, while that's true, if you have made that part of a buyer's offer or part of a listing, then it is going to apply, even though it's not essential. C says, no, the broker did not produce a buyer that fulfill the terms of the listing agreement. Hallelujah, we finally got back to the longest answer being right. But again, the listing said 5,000, the offer is 3, there's not a match, no commission has been earned. And then D says, no, earnest money must be paid in cash. Obviously, that's sort of ridiculous. That's there. So the bottom line is, remember we talked about that you earn your commission when you produce a ready, willing, and able buyer. You know what that phrase means? They're ready, willing, and able to buy under the seller's terms. The seller's terms here were 5,000. The offer was only 3. So the commission was not earned in that regard. And then again, 5.7, did you ask about that? I hope you did.
Yes, you did.
All right, good. This is another one of those blindside things. Remember I told you about that yesterday, that if we find out they're hitting something on the exam, we'll expose you to it. Because the thing about it is, gang, when you go take your final exam or your state exam, whichever exam you're going to be taking, I want you to have been exposed to everything that you're being tested on. Now, you might not remember the answer or whatever, but you go, oh, I remember something about that and so forth. But I don't want you to go down and just get absolutely blown away with the thing. And so remember yesterday we saw the blue sky laws for regulation of securities. Well, here's another one. One tax that you would have to bear when you start your career and you start investing on your own, buying properties and flipping them or buying them as rental property and so forth. Eventually, when you buy those investment properties and sell them, if you make a profit, that's called a gain or a capital gain. And the federal government is going to tax that capital gain, that profit that you've made. Well, there's one way to avoid the payment of capital gains in the year that you dispose of a investment property that you own. And that is, you can simply swap that property with another investment property that somebody else owns. And that's what is called a 1031 exchange. A lot of people call it a 1031 tax-free exchange. It really just defers the taxes. But if you were going into commercial and you were going to specialize in these tax-free exchanges, what you're going to have is you've got 2 clients and 2 properties that basically are investment properties, and you're going to negotiate an exchange of those 2 properties. So you're actually negotiating 2 transactions on 2 different properties. You got one over here, and you're swapping those 2 properties. The reason that the people in commercial love the 1031s is since they're representing two owners and actually negotiating a transfer of two properties, they generally are entitled to two commissions, a commission on each of the properties that they exchange. So here, notice that the broker had the agreement on one to be paid $4,000, on the other to be paid $5,000. So if he negotiates that 1031 exchange, he would be paid on both sides of the exchange and would be receiving $9,000 as the commission. Okay, that's where 5.7 goes. But the big thing there is to expose you to the 1031 exchange, where two investment properties are simply exchanged between the owners to avoid the capital gains tax. Okay, that's 1031.
We'll do 5.3.
5.3. For you and me, we can do 5.3. Let's see what it says. Ooh. See, remember here again, see, these things are sort of long, aren't they? The questions. They all tell you stories. So let's see what the story is here. A broker has an exclusive right to sell agreement with a seller. Let's stop right there. Remember, I'm telling you, we have to learn to read, and we don't want to plow ahead to the second sentence until we understand the first sentence. And what's the first sentence say? We have an exclusive right to sell. Now, what is that? That means the owner has listed with only one company, hence the word exclusive, and it provides that if the property is sold by anyone, even including the owner, the broker with the listing gets paid a commission. Remember that? That was all about the exclusive right to sell. So let's see what it says. It says the seller accepts an offer from a buyer for the sale of a house. Oh, okay. Not a whole lot there. It's just the seller accepts the offer. All right. The buyer meets all the requirements of the sales contract. Before closing, the seller decides not to sell and backs out of the sale. Oh, no. Is the listing broker entitled to a commission? Well, the bottom line is earning as compared to pay. When do you earn your commission? When you negotiate the sale of, look at the second sentence. The seller accepts an offer from a buyer for the sale of a house. Has the broker now earned their money? Yes, they were hired to find a buyer. They found the buyer, they negotiated the deal, and now the seller's backing out. Is the broker entitled to a commission? Yes, because they produced a ready, willing, and able buyer. So A is a good answer right there. Let's see if there's anything better. B says, yes, they are entitled to commission provided the contract included earnest money. Of course, that's nothing. I have to have earnest money. C says, no, they don't get it because it didn't close. This question didn't ask you about being paid a commission. It asked you, are they entitled to the commission? Have they earned it? Okay, so C would be like a closing question. And then D says, no, provided the buyer and seller mutually agree to terminate their contract. There was no mutual agreement. This was a one-sided back out of the deal by the seller. So the broker, yes, they are entitled to their commission because they did what they were hired to do, and that is produce a ready, willing, and able buyer. If the seller then drops the ball, or like in this case, deliberately backs out, which they can do, if they're willing to bear the consequences, they can still be held liable for the commission because the broker did what they were hired to do. Okay.
I have a question.
All right.
So say if it's within the listing agreement that happened, and then they produce another willing, ready, willing, able buyer, does that mean that the broker now can receive two commissions?
No, because it's a seller.
Seller
back. Yeah, conceivably, if it was the same seller and he liked the second deal that the broker brought, conceivably, yeah, the broker could be entitled to two different commissions because he's performed twice on the same property. Yeah. That'd be a little weird, but that could happen. All right, go ahead.
So let's say all of that happened, and then how would you go about getting your commission at that point?
I was afraid you're going to ask that. All we ever do is say, yeah, you can get it. Yeah, you're entitled to it, and so forth. We never go to the next level, which is how do you actually get it? And Of course, obviously there, you know as well as I do, that if the seller would not voluntarily pay you, the broker would then have to sue the seller for the commission. Which is, but we always stop with, is the broker entitled? Yeah, they're entitled to it, but we never go into, okay, cool, how do they get it? We don't go there. And thank goodness they don't go there either with the questions on the exam. They just want you to know that they're entitled to it, not how they get it, which would typically, if the seller didn't voluntarily do it, you'd have to sue them for the commission. Okay. All right. What else you got? Other questions?
Can we do
Can we
5-8?
5-8. Okay. What else? I heard somebody else. What about ladies?
6-3 and 6-4, please.
Can we do
All right.
6-7?
Okay. Just remind me as we get down to the sixes. All right. 5-8. Is that what you asked?
Yeah,
Yeah,
correct.
yes, please.
5-8. Okay. Well, this is a sad day because you have a property listed for sale and it's condemned under eminent domain, or it's sold on the courthouse steps as a result of a foreclosure. When either of those things happen, you are now unemployed. So this is saying if either of those happen, the broker is still going to get paid. No, they're not, because the instant the condemnation is filed or the foreclosure sale takes place, the agency is terminated. There's no longer, it's what we call extinction of the subject matter. In other words, the subject of your agency is gone. It's been taken under eminent domain, or it's been sold on the courthouse steps at foreclosure. So do you earn a commission? No. And A says, no, the broker did not negotiate the sale, which is true. The government condemned it on their own effect. And of course, obviously the foreclosure would not be negotiated by the broker. So A is a good answer. B says, no, the fee is paid to the county. What fee? B makes no sense at all. So that's not right. C says, yes, the property was sold. Yeah, but the sale, it was sold in this case to the government or whoever is exercising eminent domain. So that would do it. And then D says, yes, commissions are paid based on compensation paid to the owner. No, it's not. When the property is condemned, the instant the condemnation action is filed, the agency is terminated. The property is no longer available. So in this case, bad news is you get nothing. That's 5A. Okay.
6-3, please.
All right. Yeah. Let's go down to the sixes. Y'all remember what we asked about?
6-7?
Okay. I heard you. Yell those answers out or those questions out. Let's do 6-3 and then we'll scoot down to 6-7. All right. 6-3 says, after listing a property, licensee, now who's that? That's you, isn't it? Learns that the property was used for beer production. All right. During Prohibition. As a group home in 2003 for illegal drug sales in 2006, and as a homeless shelter in 2009. The licensee is under an obligation to, let's see, A says disclose all known property uses. No, there's nothing in the law that says that. Notice that these are not stigmas. Do you all pick up that this is a stigmatized property question? These are none of the stigmas, not murder, suicide, or things of that nature. So we don't have to do disclose use of the property. No, in essence, since it was what, a homeless shelter, you might even be accused there of discrimination against homeless people. So you don't want to go there. C says do nothing about disclosing these past uses. You know, absolutely, that's true. There's nothing wrong. I mean, in Prohibition, they made beer there. It was a group home in 2003, illegal drug sales in 2006. Now, there we're teetering on it right there. But what does the stigmatized property statute say? We don't have to disclose it unless we're what? Asked. There's not a word anywhere in this question that said that a buyer asked the broker, is this the place where they sold drugs and so forth? So again, the stigmatized property says we answer those questions only if we are asked. So C is good. Do nothing about closing these past uses. And you don't want to do D, cancel the listing. They're too hard to get anyway. But this place has an interesting history, so it'd be a good listing to have. But again, did you all pick up on the fact that it's dancing around with that stigmatized property statute? And the key there is you don't have to answer anything unless you're asked. Now, what's the one thing, even though you are asked, that you do not answer?
8 and
AIDS, yeah, AIDS or the HIV virus, right? There we say, I can't answer those types of questions.
Also,
All right, so that's 6-3. And then
6-4.
6-7,
6-4, yeah.
6-4,
And
right
then
there.
Yes, please.
6-7.
6-1, please.
What happened to y'all on the sixes? Sort of lost control right there. You obviously been long on this test when you got into the sixes. All right, here we go again. You remember the question we saw a while ago that involved the obligation of care and the opposite of negligence, and the question that we just saw that you were selling a commercial property that used to be or you thought might at one time been used as a gas station. You remember those things? As a professional agent, you need to be on your toes and be aware of things that you might encounter. Look at 6-4. A buyer's interested in buying a home in an older neighborhood. Here's your key, where new sidewalks have just been installed. Now let's stop right there. We talked about yesterday that installation of sidewalks normally is funded by the county. And of course, the people that are subject to that are subject to special assessment taxes for the installation of sidewalks. So here you are showing in an older neighborhood houses, and you notice all these brand new sidewalks in there. And you might go, I wonder if there's been an assessment for those sidewalks by the county. But let's go on. The buyer contacts his real estate agent who shows him the property, okay, which is listed with a different company. The only taxes mentioned in the MLS information are the general real estate taxes, which are your annual ad valorem taxes. When the seller says she knows of notice against the property. So here you are this agent working with this buyer. You're told and you have seen the new sidewalks. Should that basically put you in a position where you say, hey, this is highly unusual. We need to do some checking and see what's going on here, because they could find that they bought this house that the buyer was slammed with an assessment for the sidewalks. And that's what this little story is sort of telling you about. So it says the agent should, and he says what? Check with the state to see if there are any special assessments. Special assessments are normally by county and city governments, not the state. But now here, let me show you how to work a question. Okay. If you read that question, you might have thought about, well, maybe there was an assessment for the new sidewalks and this, that, and the other. But look at answer A, and that's going to tell you, aha, maybe that's what the question was really about, a special assessment. I mean, you're given a clue in A as to what the question itself might mean, even though A is not the correct answer. The state doesn't impose special assessments. B says, say nothing to the buyer because it's not discussed in the listing information. The buyer looks to you. I mean, that's why you are their agent, why they picked you to protect their interests. So if you suspect something and say nothing, that's negligence. C says, take the seller's word that there are only general real estate taxes on the property. I don't know if there's an element of risk. It's sort of like today. Do you believe anything today that you hear? I mean, all we hear is fake news. This politician's lying. That one's lying. Wear a mask, get a shot. I mean, we get all of this information, and people today have become so cynical, they don't believe anything. So here, believing the seller saying, oh, all you have to worry about is the general taxes. I don't know if I would go with that. So C is not a good answer. So we're left with D. Advise the buyer that there may be special assessments levied against the property. And there's our answer. So you observe things, and to protect a client, you make sure that you disclose anything, or sort of forewarn them. Bring in an expert. Let's check with the county to see if there are any special assessments and so forth. So that's one of those aspirational type questions that you want to do, but that's 6-4. Okay, and sort of the logic behind the question. But again, just when you're reading answers, start looking for, little clues in the answers that a lot of times will help clarify what the question's actually asking you. there. Okay. So that's 6-4. And what was the other 6-7 you asked earlier?
Yes, that's what she said.
Okay. All right. The broker showed a buyer a 45-year-old residential home that was recently repainted. Under the federal Land-Based Paint Hazard Reduction Act, which of the following statements is correct? Okay. Now, if it was 45 years ago, was that prior to 1978? I don't know. Let's see. 78, that'd be 88, 98, 2008, 2018 would be 40. That'd be 18. And then that'd be another what? 4. That would be, we're right on the edge, aren't we there? But anyway, what should you do if you think there might be lead-based paint? A says the buyer must have the property inspected for lead-based paint hazards within 10 days of signing a contract. No, if they want to do that, they have the inspection done during their due diligence period. You don't get an extra 10 days because of that. B says the buyer must be provided with a pamphlet titled Protect Your Family from Lead in Your Home. Is there such a pamphlet? Yeah. So B might be okay. Let's see if there are better answers. C says the house was recently repainted. Therefore, the seller is not required to disclose known information on lead-based paint. No. If it was built prior to 78, you have to disclose it, whether it's been painted over or not. And then D says houses built prior to 1978 are not subject to the act. No, it is the houses that were built prior to 1978. So in essence, our answer is B, that the buyer should be given that little pamphlet, which is called exactly as you see it there, how to protect your family from lead in your home. So that's your answer that we have there. Which one?
6-1.
6-1. All right. Hang on. Whoa, come back here.
7-3 when you get a chance.
All right, we'll go there in a second. Okay, 6-1. Oh, you know something's up. Look at the opening of 6-1, an Asian buyer. What's that? That's a minority, isn't it? An Asian buyer. Let's see what it says. An Asian buyer asked their real estate agent if there is an area of the city which would be receptive of her culture and family. Which of the following is most correct concerning this request? Well, what we want to avoid is what? It's called steering. And if you start identifying neighborhoods and directing people to those neighborhoods, even if they ask the question, according to HUD, that is still steering. So this says, which of the following is most correct concerning this request? I don't know. Let's see. It says, answering the question would not violate any law, but all properties must be made available to buyers regardless of ethnic origin. I don't like that. Would not violate any law. So I think we might have a fair housing violation. B says to answer the question would be illegal steering and a violation of state and federal law. That's not bad. That's sort of what we just said. C says this question could be answered if the buyer were a client, but not if a customer, as is a client level service. No, we don't go there at all. HUD says, don't touch that. Don't get involved in selecting properties based on minority composition of a neighborhood. So C is no good. And then D says, answering the question would be considered block busting and a violation of the law. No, block busting is with us in a seller, not a prospective buyer. So our best answer is, if you were to answer that, you would be basically illegally trying to steer that buyer into that neighborhood, which would be, of course, a violation of the state and federal fair housing.
So even though they asked, I guess that's why I was confused, because they asked. Like I didn't.
That's originally HUD came out and said, yeah, that would be okay if they asked you, but then they backed up and said, no. You just don't want to touch that at all. And so remember that even if they ask you, you have to say, that's something that, and I'll be real honest with you. If you were this Asian buyer and you ask me, do I know of any neighborhoods where Asians live? I got to be honest, say, listen, I have no idea. I mean, think about your neighborhood. How many Asians live in your neighborhood?
I have no idea.
There you go. You see, so You start saying, "Well, how about this one over here?" So you just don't. You avoid it in that regard. You don't even know your next door neighbor, much less how many in your neighbor. All right, so there's that one. So even if they ask, don't get one. Now, what you asked about 7 something? Hello?
7-3. So you
Seven.
said the last one was, what was that last
I think it was B, wasn't it?
one? E or D? B.
B is in Baker.
He as in boy.
Bubba.
Okay.
He's in Bubba.
Thank
All
you.
right,
7-3 was my question. Thanks.
7-3 was your question. All right. Again, watch out. Read. All right, licensees to sell a property under what kind of listing did they have? Exclusive agency listing. Now, here's the thing, gang. If you attack your test this way and stop when you read a phrase, like, I don't know if that's going to have any bearing on the question or not. Okay. All I know is this question is telling me that this is an exclusive agency listing. And I know with that, the seller could sell the property themselves and not have to pay us a commission.
Yep.
Right? That's all we know. Now, whether that applies to this, I don't know. So let's go on. All right. The entire block where the property is located has been condemned under eminent domain. Holy mackerel. Which the following is true of your agency relationship with the owner. So you have a listing on a property. So now the exclusive agency really has no bearing to the question. But you have a listing on a property and the entire block has been condemned under eminent domain. What's the status of your relationship? Well, if the house is on the block and it's been condemned under, we just saw this in another question, didn't we? What would that do to your agency?
Terminated.
It's terminated, isn't it? Remember we saw that with eminent domain and also foreclosure. If that happens, then that would terminate because the property, again, remember I told you it's called extinction of the subject matter. Property is no longer available. But let's see what the others say. B says it remains a special agent allowing the licensee to search for the next property purchased by the owner. No, that's way out in left field. C says it is an agency with an interest allowing the licensee to collect a higher commission for the sale of the owner's house to the city. No, like we saw in the other question, as soon as the condemnation action is filed, the agency is terminated. So C is no good. And D says it's a general agency. No, we're not property managers. So it's not. Minus what? If it's condemned under eminent domain, we're out of work. Our listing would be terminated. So it's very simple. 7-3. All right, what else you got?
Three, please.
Which one?
8-3.
Hello? I'm sorry. Say again.
8-3, please.
8-3. Okay, there it is. Okay, this is you, isn't it? Which of the following is a requirement of an independent contractor's relationship between a broker and a salesperson? Remember we talking about that? The broker could hire you as an employee or as an independent contractor. Most typically, you'll be an independent contractor. So this is saying if the broker wants to do that, required. Well, let's see. A says the salesperson must earn 50% or more of her income from real estate transactions. No, there's no such thing. B says the broker is required to withhold federal and state income taxes. No, sir. B is describing an employee. Nothing is withheld with an independent contractor. C says the broker must provide benefits such as health insurance and workman's comp. No, sir. There are no fringe benefits that are paid to an independent contractor. C also describes an employee, not an independent contractor. And then D says the salesperson must enter into an agreement with the broker. And there's your answer. Whenever you affiliate with a company, you know you're going to have to enter into that affiliation agreement. And remember I told you that there are two things that it has to address. One is your commissions, and number two is what is your working relationship. And the entity that requires that is actually the IRS. If you're going to be an independent contractor, your contract must specify that you're an independent contractor, which is what we have there. Okay. All right. Anything else then?
Thank you.
On agency?
I just
Which
have a quick
one?
question.
9-6.
Okay. Go ahead with your question and then we'll do 9-6.
On 9.3, it talks about the fair housing law and, you know, an owner renting out their unit in their place. And it says the answer was to refuse to rent to someone who was blind.
Uh-huh.
Is considered a disability, correct?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yep.
that's all I need to know.
Okay. Yeah. What 9.3 is hitting on is the exception under the fair housing law. And there are 3 requirements. One, no more than 3 properties, or no more than a 4-plex if you live in one of the units. No real estate company involved, and no discriminatory advertising. Now, if you own more than 3, you use a real estate company, or you discriminate in your advertising, then you are subject to the provisions of the fair housing law. So 9.3 says an owner is renting a vacant unit in an owner-occupied duplex. Now that's what? That's a 2-unit property. The owner is living in one of the units, so we're good to go with that. The owner would be exempt from the fair housing law if they, well, what's wrong with A? That is discriminatory advertising. That would bring them under the law. B, refuse to rent to someone based on race. According to the 1866 law, there is no circumstance where anyone in this country can discriminate on the basis of a person's race. So that could not be excluded. So B, we're okay with that. C says if they refuse to rent someone who's blind. Well, blind is a handicap, and handicapped individuals are protected under the fair housing law. However, if subject to this law, then apply. But here, of course, obviously, if they refuse to rent to someone, notice what it says: owners renting vacant property and a duplex, the owner would be exempt from fair housing if. Well, if they're exempt, then they refuse to rent to someone who is blind. The law doesn't apply to them. And even though they're discriminating, they're not subject to the provisions of the law. And then what's wrong with D? Advertised adults only, no children. That's discriminatory advertising. So A and D would, knock them out or bring them under the law because of discriminatory advertising. B would still be applied because of the 1866 law. So the only thing that would not be covered would be discrimination against someone who is blind.
Okay,
because they
thank
would
you.
not be subject. How about what?
I said thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. All right, now we're working our way down to 9.6. We had that one, didn't we? Down there. So let's do that. 9.6. Okay, let's see. Familial status. What is that? That's discrimination against families with children. So this is saying familial status would apply to, of course, obviously not a single person. Okay, this is a married couple with children, typically. A married couple, well, it doesn't prohibit discrimination against married people or single people. It prohibits discrimination against people that have children. So C is our answer. Individuals under the age of 18 living with a parent. That's what familial status is all about. And a married person 62 years of age or older, that is not part of the familial status statute. That's just a rule under the fair housing law that allows communities made up of 62 or older individuals to be excluded. That's there. So familial status is really, that's all this question is asking you, is discrimination against families with children that are under 18 years of age. So you can't do anything different with them. And you'll see things where, families with children were required to live in one apartment building. Families with children had to accompany their children if they were under 18 to the swimming pool. You can't come up with different like that only apply to families with children. That is called familial status discrimination. And you can't do that. Okay. All right. So we good?
10-2.
Yep.
Which one?
10-2.
10-2. Okay. All right. Remember we talked about this yesterday, that the license law says that every exclusive listing must have a definite date of expiration. But there appears to be a conflict with BRETA, which is our state agency law, because BRETA says if an engagement agreement, see, there's that word, the brokerage engagement, if it does not have a termination date all engagements will terminate, according to Beretta, when? In 1 year. So the license law says we have to have a definite date of expiration, but Beretta says if you don't, then all engagements terminate in 1 year. All right. So there you go. All right. So we good on agency?
10-4.
And 10-4.
10-4. Are you asking a question or are you saying, yeah, we're doing with agency?
Question.
Y'all need to loosen up, have more fun with these questions. The more lightly you can go after them, a lot of times, the easier they're going to be. Okay, we'll do 10-4, and then I want to talk with you a little bit about appraising before we go to lunch. All right, 10-4. Salesperson Boyd, a licensed salesperson currently on inactive status. Now, what does that mean? That means that you are licensed, but your license is in the possession of the real estate commission. You do not have a broker. And you may not practice real estate, and you can't be paid for real estate transactions and so forth. It's sort of like the old thing. Your licenses are mothballs. Y'all remember the mothballs years ago? And it's just sort of like it's in storage. So here you've got a salesperson who's currently on inactive status. They plan to purchase a parcel of land. Before presenting the offer to the seller, salesperson must. Well, let's see. A says provide the real estate commission with a copy of the contract. Trust me, folks, the Georgia Real Estate Commission never wants to hear from me and you. They certainly don't want copies of contracts that we're entering into. So A is way out. B says provide his broker. Well, let's stop right there. This salesperson is what? They're currently on inactive status, which means they don't have a what? They don't have a broker.
Okay, I didn't know that.
B's out. C says state in the offer that he is a licensed salesperson. Do you, whenever you enter any kind of contract into real estate, do you have to disclose in writing in the contract that you are licensed? Absolutely. Even though your license may be currently inactive, you are still licensed. And that has got to be disclosed. And then D says, state in the offer the purpose for which the property is being purchased. You don't have to tell anybody that. You're buying because you want it. But you must disclose that you're licensed. But of course, the big thing there is to pick up on the fact that most people answer this question, they miss it, but they answer the question B, that they have to disclose their broker, and they miss the fact that the salesperson is on inactive status, which means they don't have a broker.
That's what I did, but I didn't know that when it's inactive, you don't have a broker. I was thinking more like, if you're working and you're, I guess on a leave maybe, but you still have a job. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah,
So
but no, it goes to the next level, and that is, are you licensed under a broker, even though you might be on leave, maybe taking a sabbatical or something like that. If your license is in the possession of a broker, you are actively licensed. But if you have no broker and your license is basically being held by the commission, you are on inactive.
What about
status.
10-5?
You're going to sneak in one more? All right, we'll do 10-5,
See.
then I'm out of here. All right, now look here. Look at 10-5. What do we got now? What's the licensee? Active. The 10-4 was what? Inactive. Here we are active. Now, what does that mean? If you just read that, when an active licensee, what does that mean? That means they are with a real estate company. Their license is in the possession of a broker. So see what it says. When an active licensee anticipates transactions involving real estate owned by that person, by the licensee, the law requires the licensee to. Well, now we got two things. Number one, you're still going to have to disclose the fact that you're licensed in any real estate transaction that you negotiate. But now, since you're active, you would also have the requirement of disclosing your intentions to your broker. So now you've got a dual requirement as far as disclosures. So let's see what our answers are. Okay, the law requires the licensee to list the property with the broker. No, not really. What if you're with a commercial firm and you're selling your house? Well, your company doesn't handle residential. So there's no requirement that you have to list with your company. So A is out. B says, have earnest money checks made payable to the licensee owning the property. No, the earnest money normally is made payable either to the company that you're licensed under, or today, you know what the big thing is, to have the earnest money check payable to the closing attorney. So B is not good. C says notify their broker in writing prior to entering into the transaction. Ta-da! If you're actively licensed before you jump into any real estate deal, you must disclose your intentions to your broker. So the big reason C is good is because it says you are active as a licensee. And then D says, you know, this one's out, notify the Georgia Real Estate Commission. They don't ever want to hear from us, right? Unless you do something bad. So all this is saying is a while ago in 10-4, we had no broker, but we had to disclose to the other party in the transaction that we were licensed. Here, we have a broker. So the license law says that we would have to disclose our intentions to our broker. And that's answer C. All right. So 10-5.
Please do 10-8, and you said no, just 10-8.
Hey.
I always get stuck on the blind ass. I don't know why. I get confused and double. I don't know.
You can't see what the answer is. A blind ad. A blind ad. There's a legal blind ad and there is an illegal blind ad. Obviously, what they're going to ask you about is the illegal blind ad. And the bottom line is this. When you list a property for sale and you're going to be advertising that property, that ad must always disclose the name of your company and their phone number. That has got to be in any ad. That's either on a for sale sign in the yard, an ad on the internet, an ad in a magazine. I don't care where you're advertising. You have got to run all ads under the name of the brokerage firm and their phone number. Failure to do so is called a blind ad because you are not letting the public know that there is a real estate company involved in the transaction. Okay, so what's a blind ad? A says they failed to give the property's address. Well, you don't have to give the property's address. That's not a blind ad. B says the property owner's name and phone number. You don't want anybody to know that. So that's no good. C, the name and telephone number of the brokerage firm acting for the owner. Bingo, there's our answer. And guess what? Look, it's the longest answer. But like I said,
it's the longest answer. I actually got it right.
It's the longest answer. And of course, the listing salesperson's name and phone number. No, the license law simply says on listed property, you must show the name of the company and their phone number. If you fail to do so, that is a blind ad. There. Okay. All right. Anything else on agency? I'm just messing with you. We
Thank
don't
you.
have to quit if you're have others. So all right.
Well, I got like 5 more questions. No, I'm just
Oh my. Huh?
10-9.
All right, I'm going to do a 9er. Yeah, those 5 questions. Now look those over because you should. Remember, I told you what I want you to do is analyze why you missed the ones you did. Wow, 10-9 is the end of the world, isn't it? Okay. Ooh, look out here. 10-9, a real estate salesperson has been paying $100 to each unlicensed person who provides a referral that results in a sale. Such payment, a referral fee is which of the following? It is illegal, and not only will you go to jail, but so will the person that you're paying. Not really, but no, you can't do that. You cannot buy business. You cannot pay an unlicensed individual for performing real estate acts. And believe it or not, referring prospects for compensation is classified as a real estate activity. So A says it's unethical, but it doesn't violate the law. That's wrong. It's good business practice. You might think so, but it's not. It's an unfair trade practice. That's basically the section of the license law that it fits into. So it's what we call an unfair trade practice, and it doesn't violate RESPA. RESPA is when, like, a lender is paying for, referrals of business, or, a home inspector or pest control company, some service provider pays for that. That's what RESPA addresses. This is for you as a salesperson. And this is good to know, because you'll have some people that come to you and hit on you saying, hey, I can send you a lot of business. What will you pay me for each one you send? And you just have to say to them, I understand what you're saying, but legally I can't do that because I could lose my real estate license. And so the one that this basically addresses is paying unlicensed individuals. That's the unfair practice, that you cannot pay an unlicensed individual for performing real estate related acts. They have to be licensed. Okay, nope. All right. So, of course, we could talk about agency forever and a day, but seriously, if there's still some that are there, go back based on what we've talked about, going over the ones that we have, and just sit back and say, okay, let me reread this thing. Where are my key words? What are my key phrases? What's really messing me up on this thing? And if you'll just take the time to try and analyze these things, you'll find that you can figure out why you missed the ones that you did. But I want to touch on our next topic because it's short, and we can cover this before we go to lunch. And then I can let you work on the test while you're at lunch.
No.
Gives you something to do, right, while you're munching on your lunch. It's there. And we're going to talk about appraisal for a minute. And the reason I mentioned it's a short topic, there's very little on the state exam about appraisal, which is amazing. Of course, they come up with a gazillion questions concerning that. But we're going to start. We'll talk about it a little bit. If we run up on lunch, we'll stop and break for lunch, finish it up when we come back. But I'll still have you work on the test while you're at lunch on appraisal, so it cleans up for the afternoon. But of